You know, the justice system is supposed to provide clarity and finality. But what happens when it does the exact opposite? Today, we're diving into a fascinating case where a court's final binding decision was completely contradicted by a new law from a higher court. It's a real legal puzzle that pits the need for stability against the demand for justice.
So let me ask you this. What if a court makes a final ruling? The case is closed, the book is shut. But just a year later, the Supreme Court declares that the entire basis for that ruling was legally wrong. This isn't just some law school hypothetical. It's the true story of a woman named Leelabai Magar, and it's a real head-scratcher.
And here it is, laid out in black and white. This is the heart of the whole problem. In 2004, the final word in Leelabai's specific case was crystal clear. She was not entitled to any financial support or maintenance because her marriage was legally void. But then, just 1 year later, the Supreme Court says the exact opposite is now the law of the land. So, which one wins? The ruling that's final for her, or the one that's now correct for everybody else?
Okay, so how on earth did we get here? Well, a legal mess like this doesn't just pop up overnight. To really get it, we have to go back and trace the long, kind of complicated legal journey of Leelabai and her husband Bhausaheb.
Their legal battle was a real roller coaster. It all starts back in 1999, when Leelabai's first try for maintenance gets thrown out. Why? The court just wasn't convinced she was legally married. Then, in 2001, a different court makes it official. Her marriage to Bhausaheb is declared invalid, void, because, well, she already had a living husband. Seems pretty clear-cut, right? But then, get this, in 2002, another court awards her maintenance anyway, despite the marriage being invalid. You can see how this is getting confusing, and these conflicting rulings were about to set the stage for a major legal showdown.
So you can imagine, Bhausaheb wasn't too happy about that 2002 order. He appealed, and his argument was pretty straightforward. Hold on, how can I be forced to pay maintenance for a marriage that the court itself has already said is invalid? It's a fair question, and one that was important enough to get kicked up to a higher authority within the Bombay High Court.
The High Court saw the mess. You had different judges making totally different decisions on the same basic issue. So to finally settle the matter, they referred the case to what's called a full bench. Think of it as calling in the senior referees to make one single binding decision that everyone has to follow from now on.
And boy, the full bench was decisive. They ruled that any of those past decisions that gave maintenance to a wife in a void marriage were, and this is a direct quote, not good law. For Leelabai, this was just devastating. It really seemed like this was the final, absolute end of the road for her claim.
Leelabai took her one last shot. She appealed all the way to the top, the Supreme Court of India. But they dismissed her petition. And listen, this is the critical point. When the Supreme Court dismissed her appeal, it made that full bench ruling legally final and binding, specifically between Leelabai and Bhausaheb. That's it. The case was closed. Or, so it seemed.
But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Just 1 year after Leelabai's case was seemingly put to bed forever, the Supreme Court took up a totally different case that would change everything. This is where the legal puzzle gets really interesting. In this landmark 2005 case, called Ramesh Chandra Daga, the Supreme Court ruled the exact opposite of what the full bench had said in Leelabai's case. They declared that yes, maintenance can and should be granted in void marriages, and their reasoning was powerful. It was necessary to prevent a financially dependent spouse from being left completely destitute.
And that brings us right back to our impossible question. Leelabai's case was still technically floating around, waiting for a final order based on that full bench decision. But now, the court was staring at two totally contradictory authorities. What do? Do you follow the full bench ruling, which is final for these two people? Or do you follow the new Supreme Court precedent, which is now the correct law for the entire country?
To solve this puzzle, the court had to dust off one of the oldest and most fundamental principles in the entire legal system. It's a principle designed for one reason: to make sure that when a case is over, it's really, truly over. It's called res judicata.
Res judicata literally means a matter that has been decided. And the idea is super simple. You don't get unlimited do-overs in court. I like to think of it as the referee's final whistle in a game. That's it, the game is over. Even if a video replay later shows the ref made a bad call, the result on the scoreboard stands. This principle is absolutely essential, because without it, lawsuits could just go on forever.
So this sets up the final showdown. On one side, you have Bhausaheb's lawyer arguing for res judicata.
He's saying, look, the full bench decision, which the Supreme Court let stand, was the final whistle for us. This case is closed. But on the other side, Leelabai's lawyer is arguing that the new Supreme Court ruling is now the correct law of the land, and it would be a massive injustice not to apply it.
Okay, so here's how the court broke it all down. First, they doubled down on the idea that finality is essential. Lawsuits have to end. Second, they confirmed that yes, the full bench ruling became final inter partes. That's just a fancy legal term for between these specific parties. Third, and this is the real kicker, the court said that even if a decision is later proven to be legally wrong by a new precedent, it's still binding on the original parties. And finally, as a matter of judicial discipline, this bench just couldn't overrule a decision made by a higher authority, the full bench, in the very same case.
And so, the verdict came in. The court sided with the principle of finality. Bhausaheb's appeal was allowed, and Leelabai's maintenance order was set aside. The final whistle, even if everyone now knew it was a bad call, had to stand. The rules of the game demanded it.
But the story doesn't really end there. The legacy of this case is so fascinating because it basically created two separate legal realities. One just for Leelabai and Bhausaheb, and a completely different one for everybody else.
You really see this split outcome here. For Leelabai personally, the result was final. Her maintenance was denied because of res judicata. The book was closed for her. But for the law in general, this was actually progress. The very precedent that she couldn't benefit from, the Danaga case, became the new law of the land, ensuring that other women in her exact situation would be protected in the future.
And the law has only gotten stronger since then. Today, it's completely settled. Wives in void marriages are absolutely entitled to claim maintenance. And what's more, the Supreme Court actually went back later and harshly criticized the misogynistic language that was used in that original full bench decision, calling it a violation of human dignity. So while Leelabai lost her personal battle on a technicality, her struggle was a key part of this much larger shift toward a more just legal standard.
In the end, this case leaves us with this huge question. It puts two of justice's most important ideals right up against each other, the need for cases to be final and the desire for the law to be correct. It forces us to ask which one matters more. A stable system where the ref's call is always final, even when it's wrong? Or a system that's willing to go back and fix its mistakes, even if it means reopening old wounds? It's a tough one, and it's a dilemma that sits at the very heart of how our legal system works.